Now welcome to another Let's Talk Some Star Wars, where this time we'll be taking a look at and discussing the results of the poll that asked, what do you think of Dave Filoni being promoted to Chief Creative Officer at Lucasfilm, and presumably having more direct control over Star Wars going forward? I'll then of course also read and respond to some of the comments left on the poll. And getting right to it, 12% of voters said they were extremely excited about this and or very confident in him. 29% then said this was a good choice and or believe he'll do well. 33% of voters, or 1/3, said they're unsure either way and want to wait and see. That then left 15% to say not too sure about this choice and or don't think he'll do well. And a final 10% that said this is a terrible choice and or think he will do horribly. Alright, and this is usually the part where I bring up how these results may be somewhat biased based on my audience, but I think this is one of those times where these are going to be pretty accurate overall, considering there are a lot of channels out there that absolutely love everything about Dave Filoni or everything he's done, and if they do a poll like this, he's going to get some very positive results. Whereas there are also channels out there who do pretty much nothing but hate on Dave Filoni, and if they did a similar poll, they would get some pretty negative results, obviously. So I tend to believe this is pretty accurate on how the fan base feels. I could be wrong, but I do think this is a fairly accurate representation overall. Anyway, I'm just going to jump right into some comments, and there were a lot of them. I'm going to mainly try to read comments and give quicker, shorter, more to the point responses than I usually do. But before any of that, I do have to once again just say thank you to everyone who votes, comments, and watches these or any of my videos. It is all greatly appreciated, as I'm also appreciative of those who support this channel over on Patreon. Thank you so much for that. And now let's start, as we always do, with the top-rated comment, which this time came to us from Jory Joestar, who said, "After Ahsoka, I'm out." And even though this was the comment with the most thumbs up, it was way, way down on the list when you sort them by highest rated, which tends to imply a lot of thumbs down as well. That said, certainly a lot of fans did jump ship after Ahsoka, who saw that as a kind of final straw, and I don't necessarily blame them. I think a lot of hope was placed on that series, a lot of hope in Dave Filoni that he would deliver something exceptional. Instead, I'd argue it was kind of mediocre. I don't think it was the worst thing we have ever seen out of Star Wars, but I certainly don't think it was the best. And I did say many times before it even came out that this would be sort of a test for him, that this was his chance to prove he is the man for Star Wars, if you will. This is his chance to prove he has learned from Lucas and he has learned from the likes of Favreau and others that he can make his kind of own live-action show where he is writing, directing, producing, he's kind of doing everything. And no, it didn't probably deliver in the way a lot of fans were hoping and expecting. And so I don't blame those who have jumped ship, but I also don't blame those who want to give him more opportunities. Alright, and now let's move on to the second highest rated comment, which finished much higher up there, implying not so many thumbs down. And this one comes to us from OK Maku Tree, who said, "If Filoni struggles to do his own characters justice, I dread to think what he'll do with other people's creations. His handling of Thrawn and most of the other characters in Ahsoka bodes poorly in my opinion. I'll still give him a fair shake, but I'm not expecting much." And I think his handling of Thrawn might be the most disappointing aspect of the Ahsoka series for me, considering Thrawn is kind of the icon of the expanded universe, or one of them at the very least. He's one of the most popular and beloved characters from that. And here he is just not Thrawn. And I get in Rebels that he wasn't quite Thrawn. I know that's a kid's show. You really couldn't have Thrawn being Thrawn. But this was your chance to prove you could get this character right, and I really don't feel like you did. As I've said before, Thrawn kind of wins by default. He kind of runs out the clock like he had the lead and just kind of held on to it till the bitter end, and that was it. I really think you should have put Thrawn in some sort of disadvantage to prove his superior intellect, if you will. He also says some things that are very contradictory, like he talks about how even one Jedi can be a great threat, yet he has 10 years to track down Ezra, who is literally just miles away from where he is kind of hanging out, if you will, and he doesn't ever track him down and kill him. And it's not like Ezra is the most powerful Jedi ever, right? So there are all these things that just make Thrawn look kind of not the best, right? He's not the smartest, he's not the most strategic, and he's not all the things I think we expected him to be and remember him being elsewhere. Alright, next up we have this comment from Bad Badger, who said, "Interesting hypothetical would be to time travel and see the results of this poll done a few years ago, prior to Mando Season 3 and Ahsoka. I think most fans would be much more receptive. Now I feel the common mood is cautious optimism to downright apprehension." And interestingly enough, 7 months ago, I did a poll asking how do people feel about Dave Filoni and his contributions to Star Wars over the years, and those results are pretty positive. Certainly much more positive than the reception to this news was. And without a doubt, the Ahsoka series has, as we just kind of discussed, as that first comment kind of points out, it has been a jumping off point. It was disappointing to a lot of fans, so this isn't a surprise to see the turn. But even before that, I think there was a shift in the fandom kind of away from Filoni. And I know people have had problems with him over the years, going back to the Clone Wars and what he changed with the Mandalorians and the clones. I know all that. I discussed that in a video the other day. But it seems recently there has been a push that has kind of been hating on Filoni, and people are allowed to have whatever opinion of him they want. But one of the most common complaints against him goes along with this next comment here. And that comment comes to us from Cube Flinger, who said, "I heard someone call him a Kennedy yes man, and I think that's sadly probably right. He might be great, but it's still a Kennedy/Disney show." And this is one of those things I really don't understand or don't know what people expect. It's like they want Dave Filoni to have like this open resistance to Kathleen Kennedy, to say things against her instead of say things that kind of align with her. I mean, I've never personally had a job in my life where I could kind of openly say negative things about the boss that would be heard by literally millions of people and still keep my job. And so, yeah, I've heard a lot of people say something like this. They say that he is on board with Kennedy's plan or agenda and all that. And, well, of course he has to at least show that he is or say that he is. He can't get away with doing whatever the hell he wants against her. That's just not going to fly. He would be fired, again, if he was out there just saying, I disagree with Kennedy, I don't like Kennedy, I think she's bad for the company and all these things. Plus, he can't go against Disney either, can he? I mean, that's just the reality of it. That's the sad reality of Lucasfilm being owned by Disney and being managed by Kathleen Kennedy. Anybody working for them has to at least pretend to play ball with them. Which also isn't to say that he maybe isn't on board with them. I don't know what the mind of Dave Filoni looks like. I don't know what he feels about Kennedy and what he thinks about Disney owning it and Lucas selling. He's never going to be able to freely express that until years from now when he maybe is no longer with the company or in a book he writes someday. I don't know. All I do know is right now, if he cares about Star Wars, if he wants to work on it, if he likes his job, he's going to play ball, for better or worse. Alright, next up then we have this one from Star Wars News and Memes, who said, "I'd say it's a step in the right direction since Dave seems to get Star Wars more than other main creatives do, but I'm not saying Star Wars is saved. If I had to describe my attitude towards this, it would be cautious optimism." And that would pretty much describe my feelings towards this as well. I am cautiously optimistic because I do believe, he worked with George Lucas for years, and he has, in many interviews, at least given the impression he understands Star Wars very well. But I do think he does. I do think he gets it better than most people do. I'm not saying he's perfect for the job. I don't think anybody is perfect for the job. Even George Lucas, of course, has his naysayers who didn't like what he did. There are those who say he didn't like Jar Jar Binks being put into the prequels, or say he destroyed their childhood and all these things. There is no one, and never will be anyone, who every single fan thinks is best for Star Wars. We all have our differing opinions on how this thing should be handled, and in my opinion, I think Dave is one of the best choices out there. Is he the perfect one? Again, no. But tell me who else you would like in this position. Alright, we then have this one from Cameron Farrell, who said, "I was a fan of Dave with the Clone Wars, but the Ahsoka series, along with the interviews and comments that have come out since, has shaken my trust in him going forward. I hope he does a good job." And what I think you might be referring to are some comments made by Sam Witwer. I made a video about them a while ago now, that Dave Filoni once told him that things don't need to be consistent with the canon, essentially, because they're all tall tales anyway, and that it's even good if things are different, which is something I certainly don't agree with, and I know a lot of other fans don't agree with that. For them, the canon is sort of everything. It is Star Wars. These stories are Star Wars, so if they are not consistent, then Star Wars itself is not consistent. And for me, even saying something like that is kind of lazy, right? It just implies you don't care enough to make things consistent. It seems like a excuse or a cop-out for when you want to do something different than what has been presented elsewhere. And I'm not saying everything needs to be perfect or perfectly aligned. I can understand going with the unreliable narrator from time to time, where little details are different, or when you're telling stories, not everything aligns up perfectly in terms of time or whatever it might be. But major details need to be accurate. Again, I think that's pretty lazy if you're not accurate. And it's certainly not what your fandom wants. Your fandom wants consistent storytelling. So yeah, when I heard him say that, or heard Sam Witwer say that, it certainly made me question things a little bit, though it made things clear about why Filoni seems to retcon the work of others, including himself, which he seems to do in the Ahsoka series, with the way it doesn't align with how Rebels ended with the scene with Ahsoka and Sabine going off to find Ezra. And I know there are people who think those are two different scenes, but I don't think there's any chance of that. He's just retconned himself. Alright, we now move on to this comment from Lemieux Lapel, who said, I hope he'll do well, but my confidence in Dave has been a bit shaken. I think he has trouble letting go of characters and ideas he comes up with. That being said, Lucasfilm definitely needs someone to oversee all story decisions, and Dave Filoni is easily one of the best choices. Overall, I'm optimistic. And though I agree that Filoni does love to use his own characters over and over, we have to keep in mind he gets a lot of positive reinforcement to do so. It's not like people have been hating on Ahsoka this whole time and he keeps using her, right? When she came back in Rebels, for example, the fandom went crazy. Everybody was thrilled to see her. And so now that it's kind of shifted a little bit, that some fans are like, you know what, maybe we've had enough Ahsoka. I don't know that he realized that. I think he wants to believe his character is one of the most beloved in the fandom, and I think she is, to be completely honest with you. It's just that at this point, I think with him being now the quote-unquote future of Star Wars, you want to see what else he can bring to the table. And I saw a lot of people say that he can't create new characters, and yet he made Baylan and Shin. And those seem to be some of the more popular, newest characters lately, at least, especially Baylan. Now, is that because of the performance of Ray Stevenson, or because the character itself is actually good? Well, we'll probably get to see, because if they're going to use him more, it obviously, sadly, won't be Ray Stevenson doing it. Alright, we then have this one from Maltodextrin, who said, Dave is a man who knows the lore and loves the universe. There is no denying that. If he can provide that knowledge to creators and writers with more writing prowess, that might work. And I pretty much agree with this. I think Dave Filoni, of course, loves Star Wars. I don't think anybody's really going to argue against that. And he knows the lore, and he, I think, wants to honor George Lucas. I mean, he is a friend of George Lucas. I'd have a hard time believing he doesn't want to honor the legacy of that man. And I think him being in a role of creative overseer, essentially, maybe coming up with ideas for stories, but not being the one who necessarily writes those stories, or if people come to him with ideas and he can kind of help mold them and shape them, that might just be the best case scenario. I mean, imagine if we get more Tony Gilroy types coming in who don't really love Star Wars yet can write amazing stories and can actually fit them into Star Wars quite well, in my opinion. Imagine him working with a Dave Filoni who gives him some other ideas as well that he could incorporate into his stories that might make it a little more Star Wars-y for some people out there. Now, I'm not saying I don't appreciate Andor for exactly what it is, but you get my point. There are great writers out there who maybe are not overly familiar with Star Wars that Dave could work directly with and perhaps create greatness. I don't know, that's why I'm staying optimistic. I didn't think Ahsoka was well written, so if he's not in that role of writer, if he's in the role of kind of creative overseer, again, this might just be the best case scenario for him, and for us fans as well. And along with that comment, we got this one from Paul McSoul, who said, on the plus side, I hope this provides a singular vision going forward. The ship really needs someone at the helm. And this I agree with as well. You need someone at the helm who truly knows and loves and understands Star Wars to kind of guide the ship overall. Now, I wish he hadn't made those comments to Sam Witwer about continuity, essentially, that it doesn't have to be consistent and that it's good if it isn't. You don't want to believe the guy who now, theoretically, we don't know the full capacity of his role, I guess, but the guy who theoretically is steering the ship and makes a lot of the major story decisions, you don't want to believe he doesn't care so much about the canon's continuity or consistency. But it is certainly better than nothing to have somebody at the helm of this ship kind of steering the stories overall, someone other than Kathleen Kennedy, who, as I've argued many, many times before, doesn't really even understand Star Wars, much less seem to care all that much about the stories themselves. Alright, and finally here we have this comment from Pixel Katana, who said, unfortunately, after Ahsoka, Dave is giving me big Benioff and Weiss vibes, Game of Thrones showrunners, who were revealed to be hacks after they ran out of George R.R. Martin's material. And there are a couple different ways you could take this comment. You could be referring to the fact that now that he's not working with George Lucas, that he has to come up with his own Star Wars ideas, that they are kind of falling flat. Or you could take it as Benioff and Weiss basically acknowledging they were kind of getting tired of doing Game of Thrones after so many seasons, that the passion for it just wasn't there. Now, I'm not saying that's the case with Dave Filoni. I'm not saying he's getting tired of doing Star Wars, but he has been at Lucasfilm now since 2005. That is a long time. That is a lot of Star Wars. And as someone who basically does a Star Wars video almost every day for the last 6 or 7 years, there are days you wake up and no matter how much you love it, and I love Star Wars, but there are days you wake up and the last thing you want to do is talk about Star Wars. And again, overall, yes, I love Star Wars. I'm not getting tired of doing this in general, but you get my point, right? So if I'm Dave Filoni, if I've been working on Star Wars at Lucasfilm for all these years, and I'm getting older, he's in his late 40s, I believe, and you might think to yourself, maybe I want to do something else with my life. Now, this promotion tends to imply he probably got paid a lot of money, that he is loving what he's doing. Again, I'm not trying to imply anything in that respect, but it's hard to do the same thing. It's hard to be creative in that same area for all these years. So who knows? Maybe he would eventually want to move on. Or maybe he is getting a little fatigued with Star Wars and he doesn't even realize it himself. Who knows? Anyway, I think that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about Dave Filoni getting this position. Is this good news? Is this bad news? Is he going to do a good job? Is it going to be terrible? Whatever you think, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.